Some big impacts are possible for parts of the Gulf Coast, and those regions need to start to prepare. What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. All right, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have a bit to discuss with you guys today. We have quite a bit going on. We have our area of interest that is currently over the Yucatan Peninsula, about to enter the Bay of Campeche, and then enter into parts of the Gulf after that. So we have a lot to talk about with that today. So that's going to be the main story today, mainly due to the fact that this could potentially impact a lot of people. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive right into it right here. Starting off for you guys right here, we have our area of interest. The low pressure system is currently over the Belize, Guatemala, and Mexico border over here in the Yucatan. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to want to watch out for that. It's expected to emerge over the bay in the next 24 hours or so, like 12 to 24 hours, I believe. And then as the system starts to emerge, we have our area of interest right here that we're going to go ahead and talk about for you guys. A broad area of low pressure is likely to form over the Bay of Campeche on Friday from a westward moving tropical wave currently located over the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. Environmental conditions are forecast to be marginally conducive for development before the system moves inland over eastern Mexico late Saturday or Sunday, giving it a 10% chance of formation in the next 48 hours and 7 days. So it's definitely something that we're going to want to pay attention to. Once again, this is our first area of interest of the season, for the Atlantic season, that is, and it's kind of that carryover effect from Tropical Storm Christina. The remnants of Christina are pretty much this area of interest right here, and this huge blob that you saw on satellite imagery. So that's what we got going on for you guys right here. Let's just go ahead and jump into the ensembles, go into the models and all of that. Let's just go ahead and give a comprehensive look into what we may be seeing. So this is the situation that we got for you guys right here. This is 24 hours out. We're about to start going in the time frame for you guys right here. We're going to start jumping to 24, then 48, and then 72 hours out, just to show you that just a comprehensive timeline of what may be happening. So 24 hours out, the system's going to start emerging off the Bay of into the Bay of Campeche, off the Yucatan Peninsula, and then start making its move to the northwest towards northeastern Mexico or southern Texas. So that's what we got going on. Let's go ahead and start by going 48 hours out. 48 hours out, you're definitely starting to notice some of these ensembles starting to pick up on this tropical development, remaining relatively weak for the time being. This is by Friday night, so this is Saturday at the 0Z, so this will be Friday around 7 p.m. Central Time right here. So that's what we're looking at for you guys right here. Definitely starting to see signs of some sort of development getting its act together according to the European ensembles. Let's go ahead and go to 60 hours out now and just kind of mark this hour by hour. Look at this. By Saturday morning, this system is pretty much off the coast of Mexico over here. 998 millibars over here. Definitely a little bit of power associated with some of these runs. 1005, 1006, 1004, and some of these as well. Definitely going to want to pay attention to it, and definitely going to kind of want to take it somewhat seriously as well. Then as we get to 72 hours out, you're definitely seeing a huge conglomerate of ensembles over here really starting to ramp up by the time we get to Saturday evening, as the system is about to make landfall in eastern Mexico or northeastern Mexico as well. So you're definitely going to want to pay attention to it. I will say this system is going to likely be a very broad low pressure system right here. So if it does develop, it will likely not be very super strong. The reason for that is just because with broad systems like this, they need more time to organize and get their act together. And it appears to me that it has about a 60-hour time frame of this system ultimately before it starts making landfall. I'd say it's about 60 to 72 hours of this system emerging off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula and then moving into and before making landfall in northeastern Mexico near the Texas border, actually. As a matter of fact, since those models do shift a bit further to the north at the last second. So that's kind of what we're paying attention to right here. It has about 60 to 72 hours over water before it makes landfall. So if it wants to develop, it's gonna have to do it in that time frame. There's not a lot of time for this, especially with it being a very broad low pressure system that's going to be emerging. Broad low pressure systems need time to organize, they need time to consolidate. It's very rare that tropical cyclones that start off very broad consolidate and tighten at a very significant pace. And I don't think we're going to be seeing it like this, like I just described, until a bit later in the hurricane season. So that's what we're paying attention to right here. Let's go ahead and go to 96 hours out. 96 hours out, you're definitely seeing the system making landfall, moving into land, weakening due to land interaction. But I am noticing a few more ensembles over here with a little bit of power, maybe 40 to 50 knots of tropical storm force winds over here. That's 50 to 60 miles per hour right here. If it definitely moves further off the coast and more into this warm water, it definitely could make up for that. And considering we have a wind shear pocket that we have to work for as well, it's definitely not out of the question, but I'm, at least according to these runs, but me personally, a lot is going to have to go right for it to even get up to that strength, in my opinion. It would have to pretty much start organizing right away, and it would need to kind of take full advantage of that low wind shear and mix out any dry air that it has in the region as well for it to even have a shot of this kind of tropical development. Let's go ahead and go to 12 hours later right here. As you can see, definitely seeing all these ensembles really starting to just move further inland and bring some potential flash flooding and starting to weaken and dissipate from that point. Once the system moves over land, that's when the development window slams shut. So that's kind of what we're paying attention to, and that's something we're going to need to take kind of seriously given the potential impacts that this could generate for a lot of people. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and shift over to our operational runs, as well as talk about conditions and all of that jazz as well, just to kind of give a full comprehensive idea as to what the ensembles are going off of and how that's correlating with the operational. So here is the operational for you guys right here. Here's the European situation that we have. Not going to see too much for about 24 hours. This is by the time we get to tonight over here, according to the 0Z. And then as we get to Friday morning over here, you're definitely seeing the system emerge off the Yucatan Peninsula and starting to have a little bit of convection wrap around it. Right here, definitely seeing a lot more convection than what I had seen previously right here. The problem is it just needs to consolidate the low pressure system. Just the low pressure system is very large and very broad. It needs to consolidate all of this business right here for it to really have a shot of tropical development. And it does close itself off a bit raggedly by the time we get to a late Friday night, early Saturday morning, as this starts to head towards parts of Mexico, parts of northeastern Mexico. Here in southern Texas, you're also seeing some impacts over there around Brownsville, McAllen, Laredo, Corpus Christi as well. You're going to want to pay attention to that moving forward, and then potentially as far north as Houston could see some of the outer outskirts of this broad low pressure system if you guys get lucky enough. And I mean lucky in quotation marks. So by the time the system emerges, it's Saturday morning. Then you have the system starting to make landfall by late Saturday night or very early Sunday morning, weakening and dissipating as this system ultimately does. So that's what we got for you guys right here. Definitely a very broad low pressure system that we're working with. And my question now is, what is the wind shear going to look like, and how exactly is this going to pan out with our conditions? So starting off with the wind shear, already starting to see a pocket of low shear emerging off the Yucatan Peninsula. This is where the system currently is right now, where my cursor is. And watch what happens in the next 24 hours. Look at this, 24 hours. Definitely seeing that pocket of low wind shear really starting to emerge, not just in the Bay of Campeche, but also in parts of Florida as well. I'm curious to see how this both will connect and both will pan out. Definitely seeing an increase of the wind shear by the time we get to Friday morning, right here. But then as time goes on, as we get to Friday afternoon, Friday evening, you're seeing lower wind shear across parts of this area where it's going to be going through. You do have a little bit of wind shear further to the west. I'm wondering to see if that weakens, and yes, it does. It retreats just enough for stuff for action to get picked up by the time we get to Friday night and Saturday morning. You do have a lot of wind shear further to the east as well. That could potentially hinder some organization and some potential development, especially considering how large and how broad this is. If this was a small system and this was like a lot more concentrated, it wouldn't have as big of an issue with it, but because of how large and broad the system is, you do have this shear over here that's definitely going to maybe hinder at least some of the outflow and some of the breathing room that this system will ultimately have before making landfall. But you do have that low wind shear pocket, especially further to the west right here. So that's definitely something we're going to want to pay attention to. And the kind of shear we're looking at here is around, I'd say, about 30 knots or so. That's not necessarily an it's not insignificant, but it's also kind of workable as well. When Tropical Storm Christina formed, it formed in about 30 to 40 knots of wind shear and just fought through it amazingly before it made landfall and dissipated. And you also had an instance in 2022 with Hurricane Fiona. When it first emerged and when it first got tagged and named, it actually was a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm while battling 50 knots of wind shear. I remember that very discreetly when I was covering. That was kind of more so in the early days of Pat's Path Predictor. But ultimately, it's not necessarily the best situation you want to deal with, but at the same time, it's also not like unworkable. Like 50 knots of wind shear is unworkable. 40 knots of wind shear, pretty unworkable. 30 knots of wind shear is a bit more workable with this. So that's kind of what we're paying attention to. And the main thing I want to look at too is the dry air aspect, because, okay, the shear is workable in this situation. What's the dry air going to be like? Is it going to choke it out, or is there going to be enough convection to mix it out? And at least from what I saw from the operational run with the precip and the main sea level pressure, there definitely was a lot more today than there was in the model yesterday. But just to check, let's see what the dry air aspect of it is going to be like. Here is our dry air for you guys right here. It's going to be very dry, or not necessarily very dry. It's going to be very dry like around Louisiana and areas in the Central Gulf, but you have more mixable dry air over here in the Bay of Campeche and the Western Gulf as well, and it starts to end up mixing out as this moisture pocket starts to move towards the region right here, but you still are battling quite a bit of this dry air, at least early on, until the system starts to consolidate and starts to organize. You do have a pocket of mixable dry air that starts to emerge on the southwestern quadrant of this potential tropical cyclone over here, and you have this business over here further to the west, but it is workable and it is mixable, and based on what I saw with the precip earlier, it does look like there's a chance that you could mix it out. The only problem is if it persists, then you're not going to see too much development, especially with the amount of shear that's starting to ramp up over here. But you do see, once this shear does start to kind of dissipate and start to back off, you start seeing the system fighting a bit more, getting a little healthier, and starting to fight off and get rid of that more mixable dry air over here. So that's definitely something that you're going to want to pay attention to going forward. And by the time we get to Saturday morning, you have a pretty consolidated pocket of moisture over here. So ultimately, I would say the best chance for it to develop based on these conditions would be late Friday night going into Saturday. Probably the last 24 hours before landfall is the best shot it has to develop, unless something completely unexpected happens and you start seeing the system just automatically just producing a ton of convection, which definitely is very capable of doing given how warm the water is. But ultimately, the last 24 hours are going to be the best shot it has at tropical development. And if it wants to do it, it would have to do it in that time frame. The odds, I'd say, steadily increase from the time it emerges off of water until it gets to about the 24-hour time frame. So I'd say I'd say midnight Central Time on Friday/Saturday is when you would start seeing the system kind of its chances peak and then starting to decrease from based on what I'm seeing over here. So that's what we're paying attention to. But as the system starts to head towards the coast, it makes landfall and it remains pretty consolidated with the moisture, and it's definitely something that you're going to want to pay attention to. So that's what we're seeing with the moisture and the shear and all of that. One thing I want to take a quick gander at is our water temperatures and the ocean heat content for you guys as well. Looking at the water temperature, definitely enough for some convection. You're seeing a little area of about 30 degrees Celsius starting to pop up over here off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula right here. That's relatively shallow, not too much OHC over there, but definitely starting to see that warming really starting to take shape over here. And you're definitely seeing 29 degrees Celsius water temperatures really starting to emerge off the southern Gulf over here. So if you do see a situation where the system starts to see a lot more convection and see a lot more fight out of it, this would be the primary reason why it would, because it would basically be taking whatever warm water it has to work with and just channel it into producing a ton of convection, which if it does that, then that dry air problem that I talked about earlier definitely could easily be mixed out, considering that we're only seeing about 40 to 45% relative humidity around that area, and all you need to do is just mix it out and you'll be good to go. But looking at that water temperature as it starts to head towards northeastern Mexico and southern Texas, it doesn't really drop off too much. It gets down to about 28 degrees Celsius, which is about 82 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you living in Texas, and for those of you also living in the United States watching this system for fun. You're definitely wanting to pay attention to it for sure. So there's really not that much of a drop off in terms of water temperatures, which doesn't necessarily surprise me given that it's early to mid-June right now, and the water temperatures are only going to be surging from here. Heck, they're already surging in the Caribbean. They're surging a little bit in the main development region as well. Definitely seeing a bit more of that northward expansion with the water temperatures in the MDR. So definitely going to want to pay attention to those. Once this system's up, we'll talk more about other areas of potential tropical development as well for you guys. Let's go ahead and take a quick gander at our ocean heat content as well. Here is your OHC. OHC is starting to surge a bit more, especially in the Caribbean, but in the Western Gulf in the context of this system that we have right here. Look at this, 50 to 75 OHC. You have that warm water, and you have that depth with it as well. So if it emerges off the bay, and it moves into there, emerges off the Yucatan Peninsula and starts producing a ton of convection, this is part of the reason why it will do that, because it'll have a lot of warm water and it'll have more ocean heat content to work with. With what we got for right here, we're looking at 50 to 75 OHC. 50 to 75 OHC does not seem particularly that much in the context of what we are going to be seeing later in the hurricane season. But for June, at least June 11th right here, it's definitely a good amount for the Gulf region over here. And you could definitely see those totals really start to ramp up, especially if a nice high-pressure system in late June and early July kind of emerges in the deep south and just kind of stays over and hovers over much of the Gulf for about a week or so. That could really ramp up your water temperatures and ramp up your ocean heat content. I've definitely seen that happen before, and it's most likely going to happen again in the future. That's synoptic meteorology for you. So I know we're going off on a bit of a tangent with this right here, but ultimately, I do want to emphasize some of this stuff because of what we might be seeing later in the season despite the El Nino. So with that being said, I also want to pull up a couple other models as well. Let's go ahead and show you the GFS aspect of this, because the GFS isn't necessarily the most accurate, but I do want to throw it in the aggregate just to kind of see, okay, what exactly is going to be going on and how is this going to pan out. So here is our GFS system right here. A lot of convection is really starting to fire off early, but the low pressure system is very large and very broad, and it does start to tighten up just a little bit before it moves and makes landfall in parts of northeastern Mexico, but brings a lot more impacts to Texas, Corpus Christi, Brownsville, South Padre Island, McAllen. You're going to want to pay attention to this as well before it makes landfall on Sunday. So that's what we got for you guys right here. That's what the GFS is going for. Very large, very broad, doesn't show much development until about 24 hours before landfall. That's when its chances honestly peak, in my opinion. So that's the situation that we are dealing with right here according to the GFS. And very quickly, I want to show the Canadian run as well before we run out of time. Canadian run has the system trying to organize and trying to develop. It's very large, very broad, 1,008 millibar system before it makes landfall in northeastern Mexico, bringing impacts to that region and the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and continue to keep an eye on it. We'll continue to watch it. Be sure to listen to local officials when they issue advisories or warnings. I would not be surprised if we see a flood watch potentially in the next couple of days get issued from this either, but we'll keep you updated on all these things here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. And with that being said, we're going to go ahead and close the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you'd like to help out, hang out, ask us questions, feel free to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that is in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.